recording. Go ahead.
Well, hello and welcome to the Edinburgh Green Party Holyrood Q&A session. My name's Ben Parker. I'm one of the co-conveners of the Edinburgh branch. With us today are Alison Johnston, MSP for the Lothian region, Andy Whiteman, MSP for the Lothian region, Lorna Slater, co-leader of the Scottish Green Party and previous election candidate in the European elections, local authority elections, Jerome von Leuven.
Von Leeuwen.
Leeuwen, sorry, my fault. Jerome has been a member of the Disabled Greens Committee and has previously stood for selection for local authority. John Hardy, who is convener of the Rainbow Greens and has also stood for the party in Northern Ireland as part of the Northern Irish Assembly and local elections, and Gillian Mackay from the Scottish Young Greens, who has also stood in the European elections and local authority elections previously. Today we're going to be covering questions about what it means to put yourself forward for selection within the party and why it's important to have diverse voices representing us in Parliament. We're going to kick off by asking a few questions to members of the panel who have actually previously stood for selection before. So I'm going to start with Alison, if that's okay. And I'd like to know kind of how you came to the decision to stand for selection previously.
Thank you. I have to say that I joined the party in 1999 from an entirely non-political background. I had been involved in a campaign to save a local playing field, failed dismally. Today it's covered in penthouse flats. And that was my first sort of view that nobody was paying any attention to the community, even though practically everybody was opposed to it. So I was clueless. I wrote to everyone. Alex Salmond, Donald Dewar, who was the First Minister then, this is going back, wrote to Robin Harper, couldn't have told you if he was elected or non-elected, didn't have a clue if the Greens had MPs. I was a novice and I was a bit of a loose cannon. And then, cut a long story short, Robin was elected to the Parliament. I applied for one of the two jobs, amazingly managed to convince him that I could do one of them, and find myself in Parliament. So there I was, working in this environment, surrounded by all these people who had campaigned for that success that made it necessary for Robin to have two staff. And what a massive learning experience. So I just want to say the thing that made me stand in particular, definitely mentors, because the first thing that I think the first opportunity was the 2001, if I'm right, Westminster election. And we had decided to stand a candidate in Edinburgh Central. And I contested the candidate selection. This is how small the party was then. Like, I remember going to an Edinburgh branch meeting and there were three of us. I think it was myself, Gavin Corbett and Steve Burgess in a room literally the size of a cupboard. And then we got to the stage that we needed a candidate for Edinburgh Central. And I contested that candidacy. This just shows you how much the party has come on. Like, we had to really twist people's arms to stand, probably particularly women at that point. Somehow I let myself be convinced that I would do it, largely through the influence of two German women in the party at that point, and I'm going to give them a special mention because they're so worthy of it. Felina Gaffron and Carolina Hoffman. Carolina sadly died. They were a couple. They lived together in Edinburgh, in Granton. They had all this German Green background, and they were just sort of like, why wouldn't you? Why on earth wouldn't you? And I was like, blah, blah, blah. But, their knowledge of Green politics was so far ahead of mine, but their support in writing a candidate statement, in prepping me for that hustings, it was just immense. Not just them, there were several people, and probably a lot of the, men in the party in Edinburgh at that point who were really supportive as well, because I think our gender balance has got much better, but just at that point in time, maybe it was more skewed. Anyway, I had this fabulous support, but I still remember to this day walking. I lived in Craiglockhart then, and I walked to the Quaker Meeting House. I walked like the whole 3.5 miles to that first hustings where I was contesting it with one of my now male MSP colleagues. I'm not naming names. And I just walked... Wasn't Andy. I walked the whole way and I was thinking, what am I doing? I can't do this. Like, I honestly felt physically sick. Never done anything like that in my life. I thought, I can't do it. I know nothing. How am I going to answer a question? I still to this day remember starting to give my pitch, my face being like a tomato. honestly, I can't tell you how difficult I found it, but also how much support there was. So I suppose the thing that got me standing was other people believing that I could do it before I even believed that myself. So yeah, I just want to put that out there, that I think we need to make sure that everybody, particularly people who've not got that political background, not being part of any society in any way, shape or form that would have been debating issues, that was not my background. So I think that's the thing that made me stand. The fact as well that I was absolutely livid about what was happening in Edinburgh. I had that community grassroots campaigning background, but it was like, what to do with that next? So it was having people that said, yeah, you're the right person, you go and do this and we'll help you every step of the way. So yeah, hope that's helpful.
Awesome, thank you. I guess continuing in the theme, you've mentioned some difficulties in terms of standing. I don't know if, Lorna, you want to talk a little bit about, maybe from your experience of standing before, what's been difficult about it, but then also on the flip side, what you've particularly enjoyed, and maybe things that you weren't expecting as well.
On the whole, I've had really good experiences with standing as a candidate. Certainly standing as a list candidate on the Holyrood list with Alison at the top of the list and Andy second, I was third on the list, was a wonderful way to learn about being a candidate, because there was very little danger I was going to get elected. But I got to see how Alison and Andy did hustings. I got to go along with them on hustings, and very occasionally, if they weren't available, I got to go to a hustings. But I didn't have the pressure of trying to convince the audience to vote for me. All I had to do was tell them how wonderful Alison and Andy are, which of course is quite an easy sales pitch. So the hustings that I got to were it was quite a good learning experience, because it didn't feel as stressful as if I was the person that was being elected. So that was a really good experience. I think, as always with campaigns, because I've done campaign management and being a candidate, what I find challenging is the time, the sort of exhaustion levels, because you're up every Saturday morning and Sunday morning delivering leaflets, knocking on doors, you're doing hustings in the evenings after work, and I work full time. So I find it, by the time the election comes, I'm absolutely knackered. So I think that's something I could do better, is learn to manage my time and energy to get through campaigns.
Thank you. Again, I guess you've spoken a little bit about the time commitment before as well. I was wondering, John, if you have any reflections on the times that you've stood for election, what the time commitment was actually like realistically, and kind of strategies maybe for managing that as well.
Pardon me. Yeah, so I think in a similar way to Lorna, it's difficult trying to balance the sort of work and politics side of your life. The first time I stood, it was for council, and I was living at home where I was standing as a candidate, but I was had just started a new job north of Belfast, so that was about an hour and a half drive every day, coming back and then out campaigning every single day. And then the second time I stood for assembly, it wasn't so bad. I was a paper candidate, and I was also campaign manager for Stephen Agnew, the leader of the Greens in Northern Ireland. So I was very much focused on that. But again, that sort of consumed my life as well. And it is very, very intense for the short campaign period just before election, the last 6 to 8 weeks in particular. And even before that, if you're out knocking doors and delivering leaflets, I think basically you have to be realistic, understand that these challenges are ahead and that there will be very busy times. If you can, it's not the nicest thing to have to do, but try and use up some of your holiday time just around the election, which means you can dedicate sort of full time to, say, the last 2 weeks, just to use your time that way. And as well as that, it's important to also find time for yourself. So you might be working and you might also have a full-time campaign, but at the same time, it's not going to benefit you. It's not going to benefit your supporters and your volunteers. It's not going to help the party if you actually burn out. I know certainly that happened to me the first time I stood. I swore I would never stand again. I was just so burnt out. I just could not face being a candidate, and then it was only because I was promised that I would be a paper candidate the second time that I actually said okay. So you do have to prioritize, your own sort of personal space as well, and find time for that.
Thank you. You've mentioned a little bit about burnout there. Gillian and Jerome, you're here representing, I guess, the Scottish Young Greens and Disabled Greens Network. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the kind of support that's actually available to candidates who fall within the representative groups that you represent. So we know that, for example, with the Scottish Young Greens, we saw a lot of fantastic work around the European elections that maybe you could talk about, Gillian and Jerome. I know that there's specific guidance that actually we have for disabled candidates as well. If I start with Gillian and then maybe pass through to Jerome.
So the Scottish Young Greens are a phenomenal bunch that will travel wherever they are needed to come and help with canvassing, leaflet delivering, whatever they fancy. I don't know how they do it. I think it's because I'm getting to the older end of the Young Greens now that can't stick it for as long as the rest of them. We had a phenomenal couple of canvassing sessions during the European elections in Govan, of all places, and we did the Northern Irish version of running the board canvassing, which meant we got something ridiculous, like about 350, 400 doors knocked in 2 hours with 6 of us. So all we had was basically the candidate running along the street and people knocking multiple doors at a time and just swapping round. It was brilliant. And it feels like you're getting somewhere because there's so much getting done. But again, the enthusiasm of the team was just, we're going to do this. We're not going to think about it. We're just going to go and do it. And there are many Young Greens now that have stood at various levels for selection, whether that be internal, external, non-target candidates at council or on Holyrood lists and things. And they are always more than willing to share their experiences and the pitfalls and are very honest. Not everybody enjoys a public forum to be able to ask questions and things, but we're all ears, and there's more of us every time we turn up at conference, which is great, which means that there's more support there. And if there's not people locally to you, then at least the committee, if not more than the committee, are more than happy. Tristan was on the committee last year. Many of us are more than happy to come and chat, come and help, come and do an action day where you are, whatever you fancy.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll just pass to Jerome.
With the Disabled Greens and further, not just the Disabled Greens, but disabled organisations throughout Scotland, we have managed to get a fund called the Access to Elected Office Fund sorted. During the last council elections, a pilot was run, and almost 40 candidates got funding through that fund. I'll explain about the funding in a bit. About half of the candidates eventually got elected, including our very own Susan Ray. One of the main things for disabled candidates is, let's start with what is a disability, because that's kind of tricky at times. A disability is basically any kind of impairment you have which sufficiently annoys you, bugs you for more time and more energy than you would like. And then again, what the heck is an impairment? Well, most people will know people with visual impairments who have solved that pretty easily with glasses. And because they are solved pretty easily by glasses, it's not so much of a disability. Yes, it's still tricky when you're getting up early in the morning and your glasses are on the other side of the bed. But usually you're okay with glasses. People don't look up when they see someone with glasses. It's fairly normal. These are fairly easily available and easily priced. And that's one of the ways where you see that an impairment doesn't need to be a disability. When we look at disability from the social model, the way we're doing instead of the medical model, then having glasses and solving your visual impairment that way doesn't need to be a disability. Other issues, like having difficulties to walk or having general energy issues or whatever, are a lot harder to fix and a lot harder to solve. Luckily, that's where the fund can come in, by simply shelving out quite a bit of money, paid for by the Scottish government, to sort of make sure that you don't need to spend the extra energy, because it can be solved in a different way. For instance, with adaptive technology, I've got earphones with active noise cancelling, which help me basically sort out the proper people I want to listen to from the noise in the background. That helps a lot. I've got the speech recognition program, which helps me write stuff on my computer so I don't need to focus. And I can actually get people to be my personal chauffeur and get me from A to B, so I don't need to spend the energy sitting behind the wheel and concentrating on not crashing into anyone. All these things are possibilities for us to save energy, so we can focus on what we really want to do, which is represent people and sort for the people that in politics we get the stuff done we want to get done. And yes, it feels annoying, especially when you see how much money there's involved at times. But look at it like this. It's like we're all playing a game of Monopoly here, but everyone gets to roll with 2 dice, and we as disabled people only get 1 die because we need the other die to stay alive or to keep our energy. The fund makes sure that we get a second die anyway.
Thank you. So one thing which we do have available digitally is a copy of support available for disabled candidates. So we'll be able to share that alongside the podcast, if that helps anybody. We have had one question which has come through from Facebook, which I'm going to send through to Andy, which is concerning the party manifesto and party line. So somebody's wondering basically how you coped with mastering the manifesto, all of the policy commitments of the Scottish Greens. Where does one even begin? Any tips and tricks?
Well, first of all, I don't think you need to master all the policy of the Scottish Greens, and you don't need to know all the manifesto. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, but you don't need to do that. What's important is to be familiar with the key top lines of the manifesto, and to be familiar and comfortable with the key messages that have been developed. So in modern politics, a bolder Holyrood is a browner Holyrood. I can't remember what he was, but so be familiar with that, and you don't be scared to practice. Stand in front of the mirror and just kind of give wee speeches. Rope in your family and friends. Get them to be a radio interviewer. Get them to be give you quite a hostile grilling. Don't mind if you screw up, because it doesn't matter. Then get feedback. So the main thing is to be reasonably confident and have the support to begin to speak about the Greens and why we want to be elected. Have that confidence. That's the most important thing. The actual policies and what we think are less important, absolutely less important. Having said that, read the manifesto. And it's probably helpful, I certainly found it helpful, just to make my own kind of notes on a bit of paper. That's probably, and also little tips on, I don't know if we're going to get to hustings and things like this, but never be scared to say, you don't know, or you're not sure, or you'll get back to somebody. And the other thing is, I mean, this is maybe just me, but I kind of found other candidates quite friendly, because after a while you get to know each other, and although one or two of them might be really experienced and stuff, and one of them might be a real asshole, but generally speaking, they're in the same boat as you, right? They're going through the same emotions, the same feelings. It might be a different party, but they're in they share that nervousness and all the rest of it. And generally speaking, if you do reasonably well, they'll say well done. At least I did that to a Tory once, you know. I mean, I think it's just best building that kind of camaraderie, even in people in other parties, because it's all basically a game. But yeah, you do have to know what the party stands for, what the key messages are. And I think particularly now, because we've had by 2021, we'll have had a session where we've achieved quite a bit, you know, knowing what the key record of achievements have been, not just in this session actually, but before as well.
Fantastic. So just to round off the podcast, we're going to whip round our panelists one more time. And what we'd really encourage you to share is maybe 2 top tips for standing for selection, or maybe something that you really think it's important to share for the podcast, but you haven't had a chance to yet. So I'm going to start with Gillian to my right and then just move along the line.
Okay, so my 2 tips for standing for selection would be speak to previous candidates and get the warts and all story of what happened when they stood, why they stood, and all that sort of thing. And as it's been said already, prioritise your own well-being, because as much as your candidate organiser and things will do that, you've really got to be responsible for that yourself and not burn yourself out in the middle of the campaign.
John Hardy, the convener of Rainbow Greens. My piece of advice would probably be to manage your expectations, particularly if you're a first-time candidate. It's very easy to catch election fever and just believe that because you're in the race that you're ultimately going to win, and you're speaking to these people on the door and they say they're going to vote for you, and then you think, oh wow, I'm really, I'm in with a chance here. And then election day comes, and in my case you come last, and you realize it's very, very difficult mentally. Ernest Hemingway used to say that you should write drunk and edit sober. And I think you should, campaign like you're going to win, but basically be sober about it, and actually realize, in your heart that you have to be realistic.
Jeroen here, on behalf of the Disabled Greens. I think going along on what Andy said previously, you don't need to know everything. You can't even know everything, and that's perfectly fine. What you need to know is how to use Google, or how to use the policy reference document, how to know where to find stuff. Once you're elected, that's even better, because then you have people who find stuff for you, and then you don't need to do that much. And again, when there's issues that you don't know about or that aren't even in the policy reference document or stuff, that's fine too. Just admit you don't know it, and also make clear that you're fine with that, and that you are listening to the people, that you are here to listen to the people, and that if anyone is interested in X, Y, or Z, please invite them to tell you why and how. And that in itself will most likely even win you their vote.
Thank you, John. It's Lorna Slater here. I'd like to say something about campaign teams. So around every candidate, there must be a team. You cannot possibly do it all yourself. Don't even be your own election agent. Get a team in place, and that's something where the party can help you and the rep groups can help you and your branch can help you. Every campaign needs a campaign manager, an election agent, people to help you with comms, with emails. And ideally, you want the campaign team in place beforehand. So I hope that everyone who's standing, who will ultimately be on a list, maybe not the lead candidate, will be volunteering to support the lead candidate and be part of their campaign team. And anyone out there who isn't interested in standing themselves, but has some time to support a lead candidate, please do so. It's enormously valuable, and it makes for very effective campaigns if you get your campaign team sorted. More hands makes light work.
Andy Whiteman, I just want to add something to my previous answer about the manifesto and stuff. What I found was really, really useful was that green politics is really interesting because we're based on a very fundamental set of principles, which I think, other parties, maybe Labour in the past, but a lot of parties have drifted from. So we want to save the planet, but we need to do that by having peace. We can't fight with each other. We need radical democracy. We need people with the power to take control of their own lives and communities. And we need equality, because power imbalances won't do this. So those four core principles of saving the planet, peace, equality, and radical democracy. I found myself, if I was clueless about a topic, right, I would just latch onto one of those that was most relevant and say, well, we need more local democracy, and that would sort it out. I mean, not as glib as that, but, often that kind of stuff will work. So I just want to add that. 2 tips. Ask for help. Don't sit there alone worrying and crying. Ask, because ask for help. Speak to people in the party. Seek support. Vent your fears and anxieties. Absolutely, because this shouldn't be a trial. I mean, it is difficult, it is hard, but it's not meant to be a trial, and it's not meant to be a trial of you. You're one member team, so ask for help and support. And finally, just on the thing about canvassing and stuff like that, again, on the doors, people do not ask, well, everyone knows they've been canvassing, they don't ask you detailed questions. What they want is that you care enough to have turned up to speak to them. They appreciate that. You might be the only one who's ever turned up in a campaign to speak to them. And they'll say things like, I remember women saying, oh, I like that young man, he was very well turned out. That's how she decided who was going to vote for, sort of thing. So just being, presentable, but being nice, listening, those kind of human skills will get you 80% of the way through all this stuff, not all the kind of technical stuff and the deep green politics and the inter-party politics and stuff.
Yeah, I think when I was speaking earlier, when I went to that first hustings, I'd convinced myself that I needed to know everything. And that's one thing I've learned over the years. You don't. You need to know what you need to know for that situation. And even then, you're not going to know it all. Hustings at the Edinburgh Citizens' Assembly, Leslie Riddick turned round to me. And I was thinking, do you know what? This campaign's going really well so far. And she turned round and she pointed to me and she went, I'm going to come to you in 1 minute. Sorry, this is Alison Johnston speaking, by the way. I'm going to come to you in 1 minute, and then I'm going to give you 1 minute to explain your land value taxation policy. Now, obviously I was thinking, I wish I was Andy Whiteman. But having managed to get through what I thought was a reasonable answer, she went, yeah, but what about the young tenant farmers with no money? And, it's just, Andy is right, just have some solid principles about what we'd like to see a taxation system do. We want to see it redistribute wealth. We want it to work in the interests of the majority of people. So there are principles that you can hang on to there. I would say a couple of things. Prep is key. There are things that you can never control, like Leslie Riddick turning around and doing that. There are things that you can control, though, and that's your own prep, and that gets you through everything from exams at school to, and there are some days that things might just not go how you want, but I think prep gives you confidence. Also, I would say, for me, another woman in the party gave me this tip before I started doing this series of hustings, because I think the first election campaign I did about 23. Just have a uniform so that you're not thinking about what am I going to be wearing tomorrow night. Something that you're comfortable in. That was a big help to me. Is it just a couple of boring suits? What's your thing? Just make sure it's there. Also, having someone to come with you. A couple of older women in the party used to come to hustings with me, and it wasn't until I remember one hustings, and it was about breast cancer actually. And after I came off, I think it was the John Knox, the Storytelling Centre, and I just at the end I thought, do you know what, that wasn't that great, was it? And this person came up and said, do you know, you were fantastic, and I really liked X, Y, and Z, and sometimes it's just that, because we are all really harsh on ourselves, and we pick up on the things that we don't know, or the answer we didn't have, or, you know what, we've all been there, haven't we? We've said, I wish I'd said X at that point. So I think that's really important too, just encouragement and confidence. So yeah, prep, know what you're doing, know where you're doing it, know as much as you can, but just relax. And something I've probably got beyond it now, but I used to write in the top of a lot of my stuff, enjoy, because I'd think, you're going there to do this anyway. Whether it was like that first speech in a chamber, you can dread it with all your being, or you can think, do you know what, I'm going to do it anyway, so I might as well try and make the most of it. Because we're all out there just doing our best. And I think when you have got that feeling of enjoying yourself, that comes across as well.
Amazing. Thank you to all of our panelists. Hopefully for listeners, that's given you some insights on what it means to put yourself forward for selection within the party, and also what it's like to actually be a candidate. To throw some dates at you, just in terms of the selection process going forward, nominations are going to open in the party on Monday the 19th of August, and they will close on Monday the 9th of September. The Edinburgh branch are hosting a hustings in Edinburgh on Thursday, the 26th of September. So if you're thinking about putting yourself forward, try to keep that date free in your diary. Voting will close on Monday, the 7th of October, and there will be a public announcement of the candidates at Autumn Conference in Inverness on Saturday, the 12th of October. Thank you for listening. We will share contact details of our panelists alongside the podcast. So if you have any questions, please do get in touch. Thank you.